Hello and welcome to this first presentation of the music theory course. In this presentation we'll go over a brief introduction of what music theory is, and then we'll start looking at some of the basic techniques that are used to write music. And I hope that throughout this course you're able to learn how to write and notate music and a lot of the terms associated with writing music. So let's start with a short definition of what music theory is. You can see a very short one there. It's the study of how music works. But a little more in depth with music theory, it's the study and the understanding of the language and notation of music. So it's understanding how music is written, what needs to be put together for music to sound good. Music theory is also the notation part, writing the notes, knowing the symbols and the terms that go with writing music. Music theory also includes finding patterns and techniques that are used in musical compositions, finding what patterns are used and what works well together. Even though the term is used theory, it's not really a theory in that we don't know how things work. A lot of times you think of a theory, it's a guess or something like that, but in music theory it's actual real written rules and very specific terms and symbols that are used in music. But it's still called music theory. But just know that it's not just some idea that we don't really know. There's actual rules and real applied techniques used in writing music. And so that's what music theory is. It's the understanding of music and how music is written. A good question to ask is, how did we learn music theory? How did we come up with these rules? How did we come up with the notation, all of these symbols? Most of the things you're going to learn in this course were discovered and created and written about by studying the music of the great early composers during what we would call the classical time periods, going back in history. And these composers include Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, Mozart, and many of those other early composers. They were incredible composers, and they wrote and created music that just sounded incredible. But they didn't have these rules that we're going to discuss. The rules were found and created by studying the music of these composers and figuring out what they did to make their music sound good. So that's how we got music theory, and that's how we got these rules and these techniques that we use to write music. Just an example, this piece we're going to listen to is a Bach piece. It's called a chorale. This chorale would have been used in church. Bach worked for a church for 30 years. That was his music job. He wrote music each week for Sunday services. And so this is a chorale. It's in 4 parts, and it would have been sung by a choir. This is an electronic version of it. But this is one of the chorales, and this is the type of music that was studied to find the rules and the things that we use to learn about music theory. Alright, so that's a great example of a chorale by Bach, and again that's just one of the pieces that was studied to create the music theory that we know today. Alright, so let's start with the very basic of music theory, and that's the way that music is written. Music is written, all music is written on what's called a staff, and you can see a picture of a staff there in the definition. A staff is 5 lines and 4 spaces. And all music is written on this staff, and you can see it there on your screen that it's a collection of these 5 lines and 4 spaces. Now when we talk about these 5 lines and 4 spaces, they each have a specific number, and what you see here on the screen is you see 2 different staffs. This is one staff, and then down here you have another staff. Each staff, the lines and the spaces, have a specific number assigned to them. So, and we always start from the bottom and count up. So this first line would be considered line 1. Then we have line 2, line 3, line 4, and line 5. So when we talk about music and about the staff, the 5 lines are numbered from bottom to top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I say, show me where the 4th line is, it would be right here, because we always count from the bottom up. Same way with the spaces. Okay, we would consider this to be space 1, space 2, space 3, and then space 4. So we have 5 lines and 4 spaces. And that's how music is written, is on this staff. And so what you would do is when you're writing music, you put the note in a space or on a line. And that's how music is written, is on the staff. But the important thing to know is that it's numbered from bottom to top, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's very important to remember that they're numbered from bottom to top. So that's the basics of music, the staff. That's what all music is written on. In addition to the staff, you have what's called clef signs. And these clef signs help us know a little bit better what notes should be used. For example, if you're playing the piano and you're looking at the staff and they just put a note in the 4th space, how do you know what key to play on the piano? Well, that's where clef signs come in. As you can see there, the definition, a clef sign is a musical symbol that tells what pitches are used in the music. So you can see here, this is a treble clef. And you set that there on the staff, and that assigns some specific notes to this staff here. And a treble clef is a musical symbol also known as the G clef. And the treble clef is used for a higher range of notes. So if you think about a female singer or a trumpet or a flute, anything that's a higher sounding instrument or singer would be singing in the treble clef. It's known as the G clef because this little circle here wraps around the 2nd line when you draw it. And that 2nd line is known as the G line, the letter G, and so this treble clef can also be known as the G clef because it wraps around the 2nd line. So again, the treble clef, it's the musical symbol for the higher range of notes. The other clef sign that's really important to know is the bass clef, and you can see it come on the screen here. Bass clef is also known as the F clef, and this bass clef is used for lower range of notes. So where men sing, where tubas, basses, cellos, bass guitars, they would all have their notes written in the bass clef. And it's called the F clef because these 2 dots here are around this 4th line. And this 4th line is assigned the letter F. And so this is also known as the F clef because of those 2 dots. But these 2 clef signs are the most common used in music. So you have the treble clef and you have the bass clef. And those are the 2 most common clefs used in music. Now, so far you've seen the staffs separate as 2 kind of separate groups. A lot of times, especially if you play the piano, you're going to see the staffs grouped together, and usually there's some type of bracket like this connecting the 2 staffs. When you have a treble clef and a bass clef together in one staff, that is called the grand staff. And that's when the treble and bass clef are put together to create a larger staff. And this, as I mentioned, this is used for piano music because the piano has such a large range. You need to be able to play in both clefs, whereas a tuba can't play up in the treble clef, and a female singer can't sing way down here in the bass clef, and so you only need one clef for a single instrument. But for the piano you need both clefs, and so this clef, when they're put together, is called the grand staff. Alright, that's all we're going to do for today, is just go over those basics that we did with the staff and the clef signs. Now what I'd like you to do right now is on your viewing guide you have a staff that looks just like what you see on the screen here, just the simple 5 lines and 4 spaces, and what I want you to do is practice drawing the clef signs. This is a challenge to draw the treble clef. It's the hardest one to draw, but it's important that we're able to write and draw these musical symbols. Because you don't always have a computer when you want to write music, and so it's important to be able to draw these symbols. So the treble clef, the best way to do it is start at the top of the staff and draw a line straight down, and you come back up to the top you do a loop out to the right and then through the line, and then you come down to that second line and you wrap around. Okay, now obviously mine's not very pretty, and I don't expect yours to be beautiful either, but it's important to be able to draw them. So again, you do a line straight down, then you start at the top, you do a loop out to the right, come back down and around, and then you wrap around that second line with your last loop, and there's your treble clef. Okay, I'll explain it one more time. Do a line straight down, then you do a little loop out to the right, down, around the second line, and there's your treble clef. Alright, so what I want you to do is to draw 10 of those on your viewing guide, and then also you're going to draw 10 bass clefs. Now for the bass clef, you start in the second space, you start doing a loop up through the top space and all the way down to the bottom space like that, and then you do 2 dots around that fourth line, and there's your bass clef. So watch again. You start in the third space, sorry. You come up and around to the top, and then all the way back down and end in the first space, and then you do your 2 dots around the fourth line. That's how you draw your bass clef. So what I'd like you to do is practice those by drawing 10 each of those on your study guide, viewing guide, and then make sure that you do this week's homework. You're going to want to make sure you have those terms and definitions written down on your viewing guide and start studying those and be familiar with those terms as they will come back often throughout the course. And that is all for this lesson. Thank you very much.